Thank you, everybody. Welcome to First and Pod. I'm Danny Parkins. He is Andrew Fillipponi. Spencer Ray is our producer. This is First and Pod. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. We do every team, every game, every week. Coming to you a little late because of Christmas. Pony, how was your first Christmas with a baby at home?
It was chaotic. There was a lot going on. We did our house on Christmas Eve and family, and then in-laws on Christmas. So it was a lot of work. I don't think I'm over it yet. I'm still pretty exhausted. I did watch the 49ers and Ravens game on my phone, though, for most of it.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, because Amanda was she wanted to watch the Barbie movie.
See?
So I had to make a trade, but I still watched. And you were so anti that game being on Christmas. It's the second most watched Monday night game in the last 27 years. So get ready for more of this stuff. Now, I know it was a perfect storm. It's Ravens 49ers. It's the team with two teams with the best records, but people opted to neglect their families to watch this game.
I understand that. I never once said it wasn't going to do well in the ratings. That was never one part of the argument. But did you watch the entirety of all three games that day?
Pretty close, actually.
Okay.
Pretty close, because the in-laws, there was a lot of fantasy football implications going on with my brother-in-law and my father-in-law. So they watched those two early games like it was Thanksgiving. It was almost that day all over again with them.
So obviously this will not be a thing that happens every year. You know, Christmas will fall on a Wednesday or something. And, you know, it's not going to be a thing that happens every single year. And if it was one game at night, it would be one thing. But I was talking to our buddy Nick Wright about this, and he was on my side of this argument, loyal First and Pod listener. And he made a point that I hadn't even considered. The early game, which we'll get to in a minute, was Chiefs-Raiders. Presumably, there's a lot of Raiders fans in the Pacific time zone. You are kicking that game off at noon Central, 10 a.m. on the West Coast? That's Christmas morning, man. Like, it is just a gluttonous thing to do. And what him and I were talking about, and we've talked about it before, but part of the power of the NFL is that you feel like you have to watch every game, especially if it's your team. If you start putting these games in like sacred family windows, like I can't miss Christmas with my family. It's one of the only things in my life more important than my Raiders game or my Chiefs game or my Niners Ravens, whatever the case may be. And you miss it and you realize, well, life goes on. That might over time erode a little bit of the specialness of the Shield. I know it will always be popular.
Poppycock. I'm not buying that.
Okay. Saturday night, I'm at a party at my friend's house, like a little friend's, like not a Friendsgiving, but a friend's Christmas party. He doesn't have Peacock for Chargers Bills. Followed it on my phone, but they don't all work in sports. We didn't stream it to a TV. We just like went on with our lives. I feel like if people start to realize that they can miss these games, it's gluttonous, it's unnecessary, it's unbecoming. I don't like it.
God, unbecoming. Get out of here.
It's unbecoming. Dude, there's no way with a nearly 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old that I would trade the magic of Christmas morning for Chiefs Raiders. Now, you know, the game didn't start till noon and they wake up at 7 a.m. So, and my wife's a Chiefs fan. So we had the game on and I work in sports, but the vast majority of the world actually does like their family more than the NFL, believe it or not. You'll get there eventually when Stella's a little older. Trust me.
Well, I think indirectly you just shot down any chance of working for CBS or Fox because you're in studio or working at these places. Like ESPN did studio shows.
Listen, buddy, if Fox wanted to hire me to replace Kurt Menefee and pay me 7 figures, then yeah,
Then the magic of Christmas morning goes right out the window.
Yeah. Then Christmas morning is the 26th in my house that year, and the kids are getting a trip to Disneyland, courtesy of Fox. Yeah, of course. But the vast majority of the world doesn't work that way. All right, let's get to the game. Ravens, Niners. I believe that outcome, and we were obviously wrong. We thought the Niners were going to win by double digits. I said the Niners were going to win every game by double digits. I thought they were going to be 17-0, and they've got 4 losses already. But would you agree that exact result, Baltimore looking dominant, Purdy looking awful, and a blowout Ravens win in San Francisco, was the single best thing that could happen for the NFL in terms of playoff intrigue?
You know what? I'm going to answer that question no, and here's why.
Wow.
I know.
I don't think you could have scripted a better game for the playoffs.
Hold on. We'll get to the other teams in the NFC, but you still have San Francisco as the clear favorite to win the NFC right now. Even with that loss? Just give me a short answer.
Yes.
Okay. The Ravens now look like they're far and away the best AFC team. And we'll get into the Dolphins matchup when we do the preview pod for week 17. But the stats now on them are comparable to all-time great teams. They have 7 double-digit wins against teams with winning records. That's never happened in the history of the NFL. The next closest is 5. They surrender 16 points per game. They lead the league in sacks. They have right now the favorite to win the MVP. They have a coach who's won a Super Bowl and been coach of the year. They look like a juggernaut team now who people looked at, I think, somewhat cynically before this game. But now that they have a win like this, I think all of the other numbers that were around them that showed, hey, this is a really special team. Well, now you look at those, and with this on top of it, they're an excellent team, Danny. It looks like we have 2 far and away great teams now after this game.
Good. That proves my point, though. Do you think a rematch would be bad? A rematch would be incredibly compelling.
No, but I feel like in the way that any given Sunday trope works, one of these 2 teams could lose, but they look like they're on a collision course to play in the Super Bowl now. That's all.
Okay. Well, first of all, if they played in the Super Bowl, that would be awesome. If they played in the Super Bowl and the inverse result happened, Niners blew out the Ravens, I don't think we'd be as excited for that game. Now, if we get that game again,
yeah, I agree with that.
I'm much more into that as a potential Super Bowl matchup. And while I think the Niners are the clear-cut favorite, 4 turnovers from Purdy, that does absolutely bring into play something terrible happening in the NFC playoffs, quarterback controversy, just it's Rocky IV. He's not a machine. He is a man. When you see that he bleeds, you saw a little bit of fallibility in the Niners. That matters.
Unfortunately, though, the 2 teams that are next in line behind them, they've played this year and they've blown out both of them in Dallas and Philadelphia.
That's true. But now you at least have film where you can say, look, this team is beatable. You actually believe if someone else did make them look pedestrian, I feel like that helps the other teams. We got to talk about Lamar, though, before we get to the other games. And I know we're going long early. Lamar, as you mentioned, is the favorite for MVP. And we've talked about this. By the eye test, I've said for a long time that I think he's been the best player in the league.
I kind of called this. I said this to you, that even though the numbers weren't there, if Baltimore went there and won, he would be the favorite to win the MVP.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened here. And they're saying the hell with the numbers. Look at what he just did and look at the team's record, and that's what matters. Right. It's kind of an old school baseball MVP argument.
Right. And I love it, but 2 things on it. 1, the numbers aren't there. If he wins it, and Tyreek Hill goes for 2,000 yards.
He's not going to, though, now. He's got 1,600 yards with 2 games left.
Okay. Christian McCaffrey. He's got, 21 touchdowns this year?
So does Mostert.
Okay. So neither one of those guys. Like, we are in the midst of a shot at breaking Calvin Johnson's single-season receiving yards record. He'd have to have 2 monster games, but a shot at it. And we've got a special season from McCaffrey on a 1 seed. And here's Lamar without the spectacular numbers. If there was ever going to be a non-quarterback to win the award, again, it would be this year. I feel like if Lamar ships this award, which I have no problem with, I've said for 8 weeks, eye test tells me he's been the best player in the league. But do you not think that they should just say this is a quarterback award? Because if a non-quarterback can't win it this year, it's probably never happening.
It's a compelling argument. I don't know if I agree with that. The thing about Baltimore is that their defense has been so dominant, but they don't have one guy who sets himself apart. Like the defensive tackle who, I think, what's his name? Nwabuke. I have a hard time with his name. Registered a sack in every game. Hamilton had interceptions. They don't even have a Defensive Player of the Year award candidate. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not
pretty
just
good defense, though, man.
That's what I mean. It's not like Lamar. To me, it's not the same thing as what Josh Allen has done with Buffalo, but the record just isn't as good. I'm still of the mind that if I were voting, if I was the person that had a vote here, I would still do McCaffrey, even though they lost this game. Just because I've seen what San Francisco looks like with and without him this year.
I think that's reasonable. He won't win, but I think that's reasonable. Can I give you one more on Lamar?
Sure.
One more thought on Lamar. So it's been in vogue in NFL Twitter this week. Barnwell was tweeting about it. Mina Kimes was tweeting about it. Bomani was tweeting about it to re-legislate teams not trying to get Lamar this offseason.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I said at the time, Lamar's amazing. His best is as scary as any player in the NFL's, but he'd only played 12 games each of the last 2 years. He was coming off a 62% completion percentage, and they were overhauling the coaching staff to hope that he would be a much better passer. And that was a risk, but that he was more valuable to Baltimore than other teams. And I understood not wanting to give up 2 first-round picks and a $250 million guaranteed contract for a guy who had not been consistently proven as a passer. And in fact, since his MVP year, had actually declined as a passer. That was what I said at the time. I still feel that way. Lamar has proven us all wrong. Obviously, he's maybe going to win the MVP. But what I do think is fascinating about it is that Washington, Atlanta, Carolina, they all leaked to various reporters that they weren't interested in Lamar Jackson. And you don't see that unless it's this team's not interested in drafting Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter's not on our board. We're not going to bring in Colin Kaepernick for a workout. No one this offseason is going to be we wouldn't draft Caleb Williams. Why leak to reporters that we're not interested in a guy? I feel like the only time I see that in NFL reporting is when it's someone with a issue. And I don't mean to equate what happened with Kaepernick with Jalen Carter, but if I only would use Kaepernick, it's a radioactive name. But my point is that idea of a distraction for whatever reason, some sort of negative thing for whatever reason, that's when you see teams take their name out of the running for a guy. And teams took their name out of the running for Lamar Jackson for no known reason. And all 3 of those teams look completely ridiculous today for not making an offer to Lamar Jackson.
I do remember when Peyton Manning was a free agent, Mike Holmgren, who was running the Browns at the time, said that they weren't interested. So there is one other time where I distinctly remember that happening. What are you doing? You're the Browns. Why would you not even want to do your due diligence on one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time?
But you agree, right?
Yeah,
Normally when a team publicly says
it is, but
it's
let me just
Deshaun Watson or something like that.
Right. Let me just say, like, those teams are obviously in purgatory with quarterbacks and shouldn't be closing doors preemptively. But for the people that are already doing the Jackson victory lap, and look, if I had said he was going to be a great player this year and he was going to be a perfect fit in their offense, I would probably be doing it too. But let's just also say stay tuned here. I mean, if they lose in the playoffs or they lose to Miami, like, the season's not done yet. They've still got to play Miami. They still got to play the Steelers, who they have a hard time beating. Jackson stinks against them. And let's see it happen in the postseason. I mean, if they get to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, then I think doubly what we talked about, all of it will be true. But we're not there yet with him. He still has to have postseason success.
Okay, but if he wins a second MVP, he's going to the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
I mean,
great.
He'll be a 2-time MVP at what, 25?
Yeah. Sweet. I mean,
that is sweet. That is sweet. That is something that all of those teams right now would give up 2 first-round picks and that contract for Lamar Jackson to be their quarterback, this version of Lamar Jackson. All of them. Regardless of what happens in the postseason. Do you disagree?
No, I don't. Not with those teams.
That's what I'm saying. I think he's already proven them wrong. And then, yes, we'll see how great he ends up being. But anyway, there was just a ton that I wanted to get to there off the top. So on the other side, stay tuned. Is there any reason to believe the Chiefs are going to bounce back other than they're the Chiefs and the rest of the games? It's First and Pod. All right, here we go. Thank you for being with us. First and Pod, Chiefs and Raiders, Pony. Any reason to believe the Chiefs can turn it around other than they're the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think there still is, actually. Like, I'm not somebody that feels bullish on them. I mean, it's been dreadful watching them play. They've got 7 games where they've scored, I think, under 21 points this year. Their last 3 or 4 games out, you add up their points, they're fewer than my Steelers have scored. I mean, they are just truly right now an atrocious offense, even with, missing pieces. I just never thought, as long as Mahomes was healthy and Andy Reid was calling the plays, that it would stoop to this low of a level. But their defense is second in the league. And I think Mahomes can have it click and figure it out where they could win a couple of games in January. But I could also see it go the other way, where they get bounced in the first round. Gun to my head, though, when you say, can they turn it around? I think what you're really asking me at this point is, will they win a playoff game? Like, you're not asking me, are they going to win the Super Bowl? Right? I mean,
listen, they obviously can, they can win the Super Bowl, I think, but I don't have a much better argument other than Mahomes, Reid, pedigree. They've done it before.
If I've said this before about Buffalo on the podcast, on the show, if Buffalo makes it, at the very best, I would have them third. I would give them the third best odds in the conference behind the Ravens and Bills.
We should note that the Raiders defense, top 10 in the NFL, bordering on top 5, like, held the Chiefs to 14, the Chargers to 21, lost 3-0 to Minnesota. Yeah, lost 31-17 to the Chiefs, but it was a great half and then a bad second half. Miami lost the game, but only allowed 20. Jets before that allowed 12. Giants before that allowed 6. Like, they've put up basically a half a season of defensive football that, save for the second half of that game against the Chiefs in Vegas, incredibly impressive.
Okay, but that's not like that's, to me, that's hindsight or Monday morning quarterbacking the Chiefs scoring 14 points. They were a 10-point favorite in the game.
I'm just saying that I was not giving Vegas credit for being a disruptive defense. And then you actually look at the last 7-game sample, and for 24 of the 28 quarters that they've played, they have been an impactful defense that has held teams well below their season scoring average.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a sample that matters. But no, I think the Chiefs, we need to retire the like, well, someone will step up. It'll be Rice or it'll be Kelsey, or it'll be Pacheco. Like, they're just not good. It's not a good group of skill position guys.
Philly and New York. Can the Eagles win the Super Bowl?
No. Like, I don't think so. There's something off about them. And we've talked about their pass defense. Hurts, they put up a monster yardage game, but the passing felt flimsy. And this is like a harsh critique, but a little lucky. And I just don't, there's something off about them where I'd be really surprised if they won 4 playoff games. I'd be very surprised at this point.
I think there was a brain drain there. I think the Steichen thing to Indianapolis is huge. We're seeing the effect he's had on that team. Johnson, the play caller there, has gotten shredded by the Philadelphia media as a guy that's doing a terrible job. Sirianni had to demote his defensive coordinator and promote Matt Patricia on that side of the ball. The coordinator problem in Philadelphia, I think losing 2 guys to head coaching gigs has hurt this team a lot. Hurts is not the player he was last year, not just from a mobility standpoint where he's not moving as well, but the interceptions have been there. The defense, we talk about it every week on this show. It's last year it was the best defense in the league at getting pressure on the quarterback. This year, even with the Jalen Carter addition, among teams that are set to make the playoffs, I would put them right near the bottom with Detroit as worst defenses that are going to be a part of the playoff field. So no, I mean, you can win a Super Bowl with an average defense. You can't win one with a bad defense. And that's how I would describe the Eagles right now.
I agree. And we're not going to get a chance to see them improve with the rest of the regular season schedule in terms of anyone that they play that's legitimate. All right. I used my more about the win or the loss for Cowboys and Dolphins.
Well, I think it's more about the win for Miami because Miami now puts itself in position with a win against Baltimore to get the 1 seed. And it keeps them in a position now where they still have some pad between them and the Bills for the division. They clinched a playoff spot. They lose that game with Baltimore and Buffalo left. They're not a lock to make it. They could have ended the season on a 3-game losing streak to those teams, and they're out at 10-7 with bad tiebreakers. That could have happened for them. So that's why it's big. That's why that's humongous. I mean, the Cowboys still clinched a playoff spot, and with the Eagles' easy schedule that you just brought up, they probably weren't going to win the division anyways. Even with that win in Miami. So for the Dolphins, I think it's huge. I mean, they wanted to avoid the free fall that they had at the end of last year. At least last year they had an excuse because of Tua's concussion problems. This year there is no excuse, and they finally beat a good team, and it was in an unorthodox way, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world for them. That with the total in the game was in the 50s, they held Dallas's offense to 20 points. Yeah, they got to score more points, but I'd like where their defense is trending, that they held them to 20, and they didn't even put Jalen Ramsey on CeeDee Lamb the entire game, and it still ended up working out for them.
I think that your answer is the correct side. The very brief Dallas argument that I would make is you hold Miami to 22, you need to win. Like that's just you're supposed to be the high-powered Cowboys offense with Dak Prescott, who was an MVP candidate for 50% of the year, with a top 10 wide receiver, with an offensive head coach. That's a game that Dolphins 22 points. You need to win that game with what you've invested. And it just, I don't know, call it recency bias, but it reaffirmed my belief of the low ceiling of that coach quarterback tandem for me. That's just That's a bad output for them, man. They should win that game. You should win that game. You didn't have a ton of turnovers. It was one turnover, sacked 4 times. That's just a lot of punts. That's a lot of punts.
I think you've set a record for flip-flopping on a team in a season with Dallas this year.
Thank you. Yes. I admit it. I fully admit it. But I mean, come on. The Miami Dolphins scored 22 points against the Cowboys. What do you think Dallas wins that? 8 out of 10 times? And that's just like that one variable that I give you. They should score more than 22 points against Miami, and they needed to do it, and they didn't.
But they don't on the road, and now there's even this weird, budding group of football experts who say they can't win on grass either, which is one of the strangest things I've heard people repeat, and the numbers actually bear that out over the last few seasons.
That the synthetic turf, they're faster and all that. Yeah. I don't know.
All right, ask me the next one, and then I'll do the one after that for you.
Yep, our teams are the next 2 games. All right, Steelers and Bengals. Pony, the floor is yours. There's a lot going on here. What is the state of the Steelers?
Reinvigorated.
Oh, boy.
By the least likely human being, and that is one Mason Rudolph, who had a Ben Roethlisberger-esque game against Cincinnati, and I keep hearing, well, the Bengals defense blows. Okay, well, they held Indianapolis to 14 points a few weeks ago, and that's a top 10 scoring offense in the NFL. Huge for them. Rudolph is going to get another shot to play. It's, to me, what you have to do in this situation when you're still alive for the playoffs, and there should be some urgency to win because of the Steelers' playoff drought that goes back to 2016. They haven't won a playoff game then. Rudolph, I thought he'd play well, but even as someone that was bullish on him, he even impressed me. He stood in the pocket. He made plays. He delivered the ball downfield. To have that amount of rust, not having played since the middle of 2021, and to look that polished, I thought was a testament to him and his dedication while being a third-string quarterback for most of the time, and gives the team, they needed a spark, and he provided that, and good on Tomlin to not just give the job back to Pickett because of where he was drafted.
Follow-up question. The spark, from my eyes anyway, seemed to largely be George Pickens.
Yes.
If George Pickens, because you can't say if every receiver had Pat Mahomes, every receiver doesn't get Pat Mahomes, but like if George Pickens had Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, the 10th best quarterback in the NFL, are we talking about him as a top 15 wide receiver in the league?
No.
It's a loaded position.
That's a great question, but I just don't think he gets it. I still don't think that the production was amazing. He had 2 touchdowns of over 65 yards. Antonio Brown never did that in a game.
And he was just, dude, he made NFL defensive backs look slow.
Yes, but
it's hard to do.
I know, but I still don't think he understands the depth to which he offended not just fans and media, but his own teammates. If you had taken a vote in that locker room after the Indianapolis game, I don't think his teammates would have wanted him to play. I don't think so.
What about now?
Well, I think that there's also a side of it where this is the worst possible outcome, because now he's back to thinking like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I don't need benched. I don't need punished. I don't need disciplined. This is how good I am. So I think it adds to that complex, that kind of narcissistic thinking. It's just, and I don't think it's because Steelers fans are scarred by Antonio Brown. There's other guys, whether it's Chase Claypool, Martavis Bryant. There's just been too many players like this that have walked through here. So I kind of think I know him when I see him. And I just think this is a guy that is going to tantalize football fans with his abilities until he retires. Like, I think he's going to have a handful of games like this over his career that remind you what's in there. But I think the number of times where he either has a bad game or doesn't try as hard might equal or exceed what we saw against the Bengals. So I don't think the problem's solved with him. Bears and Cardinals. I didn't know this. The Fields versus Lamar comps are prevalent. What does Danny Parkins make of them?
Okay. So my buddy Kevin Lapka tweeted this out. He's a big Fields guy.
Do I know him? Does he work in the media, or is he a kid you went to high school with?
No, he works at the Score and like digital. He does our digital stuff, but he's great. And he's got a tweet that's gone very viral locally. Fields v. Lamar last 17 games. And he notes that one is about to win the MVP, while the other is future with the franchise in doubt. Okay, this is the last 17 games. Justin Fields, 29 total touchdowns. Lamar, 24 total touchdowns. Fields, 4,192 total yards. Lamar, 4,449 total yards. Fields, 19 giveaways. Lamar, 15 giveaways. Fields, 84.7 rating. Lamar, 94.3 rating.
Okay.
So obviously comparable. Fields obviously trending upwards. And I respect that. And I love Lamar. And I understand the discourse that's happening. Just patience. Look, build around Lamar. See what happens. Give him a passing offensive that's competent with coaching. See what happens. Draft wide receivers. Look what happens. I get it. Fields has never shown consistently the passing upside that Lamar has shown. When you do total yards, the whole point is that the running thing has an expiration date. You need to show it as a passer with a degree of consistency. And while Lamar the last couple of years has been inconsistent, he did have 36 touchdowns against 6 interceptions as an MVP. Fields has never come close to that. And so the Bears, I think, are going to move on from Justin Fields. And I think Fields is going to start in the NFL next year for another team that's going to be thrilled to have him. And whoever the Bears draft, Caleb Williams or Drake May, there's going to be a real variable, whether it's 10%, 30%, 50%, whatever, that player ends up being worse than Justin Fields. And if that happens, those of us that are advocating moving on are going to have egg on our face. And Ryan Poles, who actually will be staking his reputation to it, will be fired. But I think you have to remove yourself from the amazing stuff that Fields can do athletically and say, is he going to be able to do that in 5 years? Is he going to be able to do it in 10 years? And do you think that as he gets more expensive, he's going to develop quick enough as a passer and you're going to hit on the next coach correctly that can unlock it for him? It's just a lot of things, as opposed to young quarterback who's cheaper, who's got a higher ceiling as a passer. Like, to me, that is fudging the numbers a little bit to make him seem closer to Lamar than he is, when Fields has never shown Lamar's ceiling as a passer, except for a data point here and a data point there. But it's every week, man. Every week there's something like this that illustrates how tough of a decision this potentially is.
I would just add that if part of the future of the quarterback position in Chicago is that the coaches get blown out of there too, because you want to give that player better coaching and a fresh opportunity, I think the same thought should apply to Fields. I just have questions about whether or not he's been put in positions to succeed the entire time he's been there. And even though the personnel has been better there this year, I still don't think he's been given the type of coaching that you would want to give a young quarterback.
Definitely not.
In a new place, I think he has a chance to correct some of those passing game problems that you touched on.
Definitely. I agree completely. It is not entirely fair to Fields, but it's the reality given that they have the number 1 pick.
Bucks and Jags. Okay, this is interesting. What odds would you want for a Baker is back and Pederson is gone parlay?
Okay, so Baker's back. Baker's going to be Tampa's quarterback next year. I'd put that at like 90%. Do you agree? If not higher?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So basically the question is Doug Pederson in play to get fired?
No.
Because you say no?
No. I
Is
don't
that
think
simply
so.
because a bunch of other coaches are going to get fired? Because that's a terrible performance. That's a terrible performance.
Couple things in play here. Obviously, what happened with Urban Meyer, and he's owed a ton of money, and the way that situation went south on the owner there, I don't think he wants to pay another coach not to work
They've
and
lost
fire.
4 straight games.
I don't think he wants to fire somebody off of one bad year. I know they've lost 4 straight games. There's also been, and I know this hasn't been there the entirety of their problems. There's also been an injury question with Lawrence in like every single one of those games. Concussions, shoulders, knee, ankle. So I think that's the way they're going to, when this season ends in disappointment, that's going to be the way that they excuse their collapse. That Trevor Lawrence played through injury, but was not 100% and was not himself.
All right.
So I would put it like you said, odds. I think it's like 50-1.
50-1?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think there's any, I don't think unless Pederson does something, basically defies his owner and says, the hell with you, I'm going to do something that you don't want and thumb my nose at your authority. I think that he's back almost no matter what. They could lose out, and I think
you want to put up 1,000 against my 20?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so. It ain't 50-1, buddy. The players are coming out after the game and saying it's like we don't practice. I
still don't think there's any shot he gets fired.
Okay. I don't think it's going to happen, but if 4 losses turns into 6, I do think it's on the board. Especially it's Tennessee and Carolina to close. Those would be horrifying. It ain't 50. I can tell you it's not 50. We've got the bad games. We still have Detroit, Minnesota, Josh Allen for MVP, and if the Browns can win a playoff game. More first and pod after this. All right, Pony, Browns and Texans. Would you pick the Browns to win a playoff game as it sits right now?
Yeah, because I think they're going to get matched up against the AFC South winner.
Yep.
And whether that's Indianapolis, who they've already gone in there and beat this year, and that was with P.J. Walker at quarterback, or Jacksonville and the way that they've stumbled to the finish line, I would take them in either game right now. Now, look, Flacco easily, at some point, this could strike midnight, and he could turn back into the pumpkin. And once it starts with him going downhill, I could see it getting worse and snowballing on them. I think that's totally possible. But with as good as their defense is, with the way Njoku's playing right now, their offensive line has gotten by with injuries and been able to overcome them. And to do this without Nick Chubb, one of the best players in the entire NFL, is a testament to the overall roster that they've built there and the decision to bring Flacco in. So you're right. So yeah, I would pick them to win a playoff game and get to the divisional round.
I would too. If it went chalk the rest of the way and you give the edge to the home teams, AFC playoff picture would be Ravens with a bye, Buffalo at Miami in the 7-2, Indy at KC in the 6-3, and Cleveland at Jacksonville in the 5-4. I like all 3 of those storylines for the AFC. Like, that'd be a horrifying loss for the Chiefs if they lost to the Colts. The Browns clearly could win, and Buffalo, Miami, obviously, division game. NFC, I don't love the storylines as much. I think we're pretty much locked into Dallas at Tampa, then Seattle at Detroit, and Rams at Eagles. It's not bad, but I'd rather, as we've talked about, it be Rams in Detroit and Seattle in Philly. But obviously 2 weeks, things can change, but that's if it goes chalk the rest of the week.
I would pick 3 upsets there. I would take Buffalo to beat Miami. I would take the Browns to beat the Jags. And I would take the Rams to beat who did you have them?
Eagles?
No, I'd pick the Cowboys to beat the Bucks would be the third one for me.
But I mean, that would be an upset by seed only. That would not be an upset with the spread.
No, you're right. They'd be favored.
Yeah.
Bills and Chargers. You ask, can Josh Allen win the MVP? You think there's an argument for that?
Yes, I do. I think there's an argument for it. I think that he is Buffalo's offense. I think statistically, with some of the counting numbers, he's going to finish better than Lamar Jackson. And if he ends up getting, if they win out, I'm pulling it up right now to have it. I mean, he's 13-1. Lamar's minus 175, McCaffrey plus 470, Tua plus 900, and Josh Allen at plus 1300. I don't think Tua can win because of Tyreek. I'm not positive McCaffrey can win because he's a running back and there's Purdy on the board. All it really takes is Josh Allen to ball out the last two games over Lamar in a decided and make the numbers have enough of a discrepancy there. And yeah, I could see Josh Allen winning it. And the argument would be what you alluded to earlier. The Ravens defense is much better than the Bills, and Allen is doing more with less than Lamar is. And, oh yeah, by the way, he hasn't won one.
I think you're selling Tua short in this because if the Dolphins beat the Ravens, then the Dolphins clinch the AFC East, and that game against the Bills in the last week of the season, they would still be playing for the number 1 seed, but Buffalo couldn't win the division. And I think the only way that Allen would leapfrog Tua in the voting would be to win the division, but then that would mean Baltimore beats Miami, and then Lamar is right back in the MVP driver's seat. I do think if Miami wins the next 2 games, unless it's just like an all Tyreek affair and he's just far and away their best player, I think if it looks like it did against Dallas, but instead of scoring 22 points, they score like 30, I think Tua could win the award. If they
I disagree.
If they finish with the best record in football and they beat the team that just blew out San Francisco, and then they beat Buffalo, the quote unquote team that no one wants to play, and they finish the season 13-4, I think he can win the MVP. I think he's got a better shot than Josh Allen.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think Josh Allen's got a better shot at it. I mean, in that very specific scenario that you outlined, then sure, there's a path, but that is not a path that I would bet on at that number.
Lions and Vikings, is Detroit back?
If the argument is they're going to win the division and a belief that they're going to win a playoff game, how they've played the last 2 weeks, 42 against Denver, 30 in Minnesota, that's the recipe. I mean, scoring 30 or more, being a top 5 offense in the NFL, in their building, on the fast track of the dome, like that is how they win and how they would talk themselves into being able to beat anybody by outscoring anybody. So by the not Super Bowl, not the NFC bet that we have, but like, just successful season, winning the first home playoff game in Detroit in 30 years. Yeah, I think they're back on track for that because of their offense.
Yeah, they've won 11 games. The record in a regular season there is 12. They're going to host a playoff game for the first time since 1993. Yeah, I mean, I'd say they're back. I don't have great hopes for them to win multiple playoff games, but just the response to what they did against Minnesota, the way that the team was emotional afterwards, the way that the Lions fan base has reacted to it. Yes, I would say they're back, because I did think there was a chance on Thanksgiving when they lost to Green Bay that this whole thing was going to collapse and they were going to possibly miss the playoffs altogether. Colts and Falcons. You think Shane Steichen's the coach of the year if they make the playoffs?
So normally there's not much value betting the awards market this late in the year. But does this
if you'd bet Lamar Jackson before Christmas night, that would kind of fly in the face.
I know. There are 2 games left. 2 games left. Does it make any sense to you that Kevin Stefanski is plus 130, Dan Campbell is plus 240, and Steichen's all the way down at plus 650?
Really?
Yeah. Does that make any sense? Why is Stefanski so much more responsible for what's happening than Steichen is? And Campbell, who I like, and a great culture guy and a great leader, but again, it's their offense over their defense. I mean, if Indy does this, man, with a backup quarterback, I know it's a bad division. I know it's not that impressive in terms of the teams they've beaten, But explain to me why that's not 3 coaches with relatively even odds and why he is, I get 40 extra cents on the dollar.
I said this about him before he was even really considered for the award. This is going back like a month ago. I just don't think it's sexy enough. I don't think there's enough narrative appeal to what's gone on there. Stefanski resurrects Joe Flacco, a former Super Bowl winning quarterback who was on the couch. Campbell authors a turnaround for a moribund franchise that had been a laughingstock for, forever. They've never been to a Super Bowl. So I think those stories trump what's happened in Indianapolis. But as far as like impressive coaching job, look at the Browns' odds to make the playoffs and the Lions' odds to make the playoffs before the season started and compare those to Indy. And then they lose Anthony Richardson. I mean, what the Colts have done as far as what did a coach do with the team? My opinion, he's done a better job than both Campbell and Stefanski. And it's in Campbell's case, it's not close. Campbell's done what people thought he would do with the Lions before the season started.
Right. My biggest bet of the year was Lions to win the division.
Right.
Like, it was not anybody paying attention to what the Lions did last year knew they were clearly the best team in the division. Dude, if the Colts beat Vegas and Houston, and both those games are at home, they will have won 7 of their last 9 games.
Double-digit win season for them.
Plus 650 is a good number, man.
I know.
That's a good number for this late in the year for a guy who it's not like Kevin Stefanski's a sexy guy to get it. Like, I do not understand why it's that much longer, but not other than nobody knows what he looks like.
Give me the last one here, because I've got an answer on this question that you posed for these hodgepodge of teams.
All right, so I put 4 games together: Patriots, Broncos, Seahawks, Titans, Packers, Panthers, and Commanders, Jets. What, if anything, matters from the teams that played that aren't going to the playoffs?
I'm stunned that you would lump Seattle in with those teams not making the playoffs. I think if they beat Pittsburgh and beat Arizona and get to 9 wins, they're probably going to get in. So I think
I get that is, I guess, probably true, but I wanted to lump some together because I had so many hot Niners and Ravens takes.
Yeah. And I think
those takes were great, by the way.
And I think Green Bay, I don't know what their odds are to make the playoffs. I feel like there's a path for them where NFC teams blow it in the last 2 weeks here where they get into. And that game was too close to comfort if I'm a Packers fan. But their offense, Aaron Jones had a big game, even though I don't think he scored a touchdown, but he was denied at the goal line a couple times, was very involved. With wide receivers hurt, Love still played decently enough. They've got Minnesota in week 18. I know that. They've got them on New Year's Eve night, excuse me. And then the Bears, right? In week 18, is that right? Yeah.
Bears, Packers that season.
I think they can win out and go 9-8 and then get tiebreakers. What do you have their odds?
I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it on the fly. I apologize.
But I'll just say, to among this like group of sorry teams, I think 2 of them can still get in, Seattle and Green Bay.
I would just like to thank the Packers. I was rooting for them against the Panthers. Helped the Bears tremendously for the number 1 pick.
And the Patriots for playing their way out of a quarterback the last couple of weeks. How about that?
Yep. Complete insanity. All it's going to take is Jacksonville to beat Carolina at home, and the Bears get shipped the number 1 pick with no week 18 drama. How amazing is that? That is remarkable.
All right, man. Good stuff here. Better late than never on this one.
Yep. Merry Christmas. Appreciate the audience for understanding. Thank you to Spencer Ray, our producer. You can still give us a belated gift of a 5-star review. Tell a friend. First and Pod. Peace.